You're listening to 94.4 FM Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show. For your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you all the news from the local area and around the world. We're very fortunate in this show to bring you some of the world's best athletes, sports people, coaches, trainers. We've interviewed sports psychologists. We also have a segment where we interview people in the field of psychology and related fields, and we've been very fortunate to speak to some of the world's leading figures in the field of psychology to give us a really fascinating insight into their work and into research. And today we have a really interesting guest. We bring you guests from around the world to give us these fascinating insights into their role in different countries, and it's a really interesting perspective to hear what people do in sort of different countries. And today we've got a really, really interesting guest who's the assistant coach in the Jamaican senior national women's team. We aim to promote women's football and sport in general as well on the show. David Gough, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks, Jimmy. Really appreciate the opportunity.
No, great to have you on board. And you know, the show, we aim to get as many people involved in sport, or even watch the game, or get involved and learn more about the game. And I suppose with yourself, I mean, it's pretty interesting, role you have there, and we'll sort of talk about that more on the show. But how did it all begin for you? How did you sort of get into coaching yourself?
Well, I mean, the reality of it is, I pretty much like everybody else, I love football from a very early age. I was probably a very bang average player, but I had the love for the game, and I was very fortunate in my small town where I grew up in Abertrydydd in South Wales, that there was a YMCA where we could go every week and play, and you know, we played all kinds of things. We played every sport. This is like early 1990s, like late 1980s, and it was a time when sport was all there was, really. It was a time before social media, time before internet, you know, and we forget those days a little bit. But my sort of initial steps into that world was just playing as many sports as I can, trying to be as good as I can at all of those. And I was very lucky that there were some people who volunteered their time, real honest people who probably worked 50-hour weeks, and then for some reason came to the YMCA and put on sessions for us to kick a ball around. And I'll always be grateful to those guys for doing that, because they put me where I am today.
Yeah, no, it's interesting stuff, and you're obviously passionate about the game, and you know, you've sort of managed to experience the game in different sort of countries, and which is sort of unique and a great opportunity. So obviously football's great in the sense that it's sort of, you know, we call it a football family, where across almost, you know, every country around the world. What are your experiences like working in different countries? What's that been like for you, David? That's really fascinating in terms of experiencing different sort of cultures and countries. And I mean, I know it's difficult to explain, and you could sort of write a book on it, no doubt. But just in general, what's it like working in different places around the world?
I mean, it is phenomenal. Like there's no doubt about it. And young coaches out there, aspiring coaches, with young players, like, football can provide you with such a wonderful experience in life, obviously, as well as as a profession. I think at the last count I visited maybe 17, 18 different countries, and countries that you wouldn't necessarily travel to for any other reason. You know, we played in Bosnia. You know, wow. We played in places that you would never travel to as a tourist. You know, and we played in Serbia. We played in places when I was with England, when we were in the qualifying campaign for Euro 2017, we travelled all around, and you do get to see parts of the world that you wouldn't necessarily get to see, so that's fantastic in itself. And then I think the second part, Jimmy, is seeing how football or soccer in the United States is coached. You know, completely different terminology, completely different mindset, different set of problems, which I think is a fantastic challenge for any coach, you know.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, from your perspective, I mean, the game in the USA is sort of growing, and you know, we know about the USA as a sporting nation. They're sort of generally second to none in terms of their, you know, desire to win, and they produced many great athletes over many years. Where do you think the USA is in sort of, I know it's difficult to say, but we've seen some American players, we've seen sort of Chelsea, Juventus, some sort of, you know, big name players now from America. How close do you think America's getting to Europe, in your opinion, David?
Well, I think the reality is, for a long time, I think in Britain especially, we're probably guilty a little bit of looking across the world to other football nations and other countries, and almost, it's an old school view, but I think we kind of thought, well, it's our game and we're the best at it, and everybody else is kind of playing at it, and that's changed. We've seen the emergence in Europe of minor nations doing great things, smaller countries doing amazing things, and even in my own country in Wales, nobody would have given us a shot on a national stage for the last 50 years, and we went to Euro 2016 and reached the semi-final, and I think those stories are much more common now than they were perhaps in the past couple of decades, and in countries like the US you see a resurgence now, or an amalgamation of players in Europe and playing in the major clubs and starting for Dortmund and Chelsea and other clubs, Juventus, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the amalgamation of years and years and years of work of experts on the domestic level, on the international level, and fantastic coaches all around the world who've helped develop players to be at the level they're at now, whereas perhaps 20 years ago these countries didn't have those level of players.
Now, interesting you say, and I mean that sort of, as the reference to the men's game. In the women's game, obviously the USA has been at the forefront for many years, and they've produced so many great footballers and athletes over the years as well. When you're involved in the England team, you had a great run, and I think that at that point, England as a women's footballing nation sort of emerged and was really competitive on a world stage. And what was your experience like working with England? Obviously, you won the bronze medal at the 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup. What was your experience in general working with the England women's team?
Fantastic memories. We have, without a shadow of a doubt, 23 players and probably 18, 19 staff who will, if you spoke to any of them, will warmly remember the period, the experience, and obviously culminating in a superb achievement of being the first group of players to go to a World Cup semi-final since 1990, and obviously only one England team since 1966 to win a major medal at a major World Cup tournament, which is a phenomenal achievement. And I think it was probably underlined by the fact that it was a great time for women's football. There was some fantastic work being done, across the country in the clubs, and the spotlight really was on women's football for the first time. I always kind of tell a little story. It's really disappointing for me because at the same time that we were in Canada for 7 weeks, obviously, and we were preparing for the World Cup semi-final against Japan. I had a phone call from my daughter who was back in Wales in school, and she'd been told by one of her teachers that girls don't play football.
Wow.
And she couldn't join the boys' team, and she was in tears. And obviously, my first thought was to console my daughter, but afterwards I reflected on it and thought, well, isn't that a shame? Isn't that a shame that in 2015, there I am, sat there in a hotel in Canada preparing for this game, and my own daughter's been told girls don't play football, and that was things were changing, but they hadn't changed enough. And I think as you look at it now, 5 years on, the success of the England team since then, the success of the grassroots game and the centres of excellence in England and everything else around the promotion of the women's game has been phenomenal. And I really, really am happy to have played my small part, for whatever it's worth, in propelling the game to that stage.
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure, and that's really important that for the listeners and anyone who wants to get involved in sport, and any girl or woman who wants to get involved in football, even if he's not playing at the highest level, just getting out there and playing is great stuff. And I mean, not everyone's going to end up playing for their country or playing professionally, but you can get out there. And is that one thing that you're sort of keen on as well, David, to see people just get involved in the game, women get involved in the game, irrespective of what level it is?
I am, Jimmy. I'll be honest, and I think for me, it comes from my early days. I had a fantastic. I was very lucky and fortunate in the way that my career started out, and I started in a small town called Merthyr Tydfil, where I worked there with a wonderful lady called Wendy Groves, who literally took me under her wing and taught me about development and participation and the values of sport, not just football, but everything you've just said there. You don't have to be an elite player. You don't have to be you don't have to be a player. You can be an official. You can be an administrator. You can be someone who supports others to do it. And sport has a network and a tradition in Britain where, yes, we always support our athletes, we also always support our teams, but also I think what's become fundamental is the network and the army of people behind that. And I would encourage anybody to get involved, anybody out there, whether you want to be a coach, a player, an official administrator, or even just go and support and watch. My life has been enriched by the fact that I've been involved in sport, and that doesn't mean the medals, it doesn't mean the exposure and the coaching at the elite level. Every day of my life is better because I'm involved in sport, and I want people to understand that, wherever they are, especially in terms of where we are now back home. I know there's lockdowns everywhere, and the pandemic's been running for a long time, and I know sometimes it can look a bit bleak and a little bit hard, and just having that aspirational side of sport, that inspirational side of sport, it's always been a British thing that brings us together.
Absolutely.
And I think it's going to play a huge role in bringing us out of where we are now as we go into 2021 as well.
Absolutely, and I suppose that's sort of one of the concerns. I don't know as much as yourself and many other people at the women's game, but one thing that I have to admit I've been sort of concerned about is the game was making huge strides in the women's game, and obviously we need to take precautions, and I fully understand it and appreciate that, and obviously health and safety comes first and everything else, and we're seeing some really big crowds in the domestic game, in the women's game in the UK, obviously prior to COVID, and that sort of couldn't, that's in every sport really. The guidelines have come in and we've been adhering to them, and no doubt every club puts health and safety first. But do you think, sort of moving forward, that momentum can build again in the game? Obviously, no one's got a crystal ball to see how the pandemic's going to go, but I mean, just generally speaking, getting the game on TV and just finding ways to publicise the game. Do you think it's key to sort of keep it going?
I do, Jimmy. I do. I think I've been very fortunate the last 5 years to be associated with women's football on one level or another, and I'm very proud of my time and in the women's game. And one thing I've learned off the field is how resolute people in the women's game are. The level of determination and grit that perhaps some men's clubs and players haven't had to go through. People involved in the women's game have had to do this the hard way. They continue to do it the hard way. I have no doubt they'll meet the challenges that are facing the women's game going forward. And let's have it right. There's nobody in the women's game who's saying that we should play football regardless of what's going on in society. Of course, you're dead right what you say there. We have to make sure 100% that we adhere to every government guideline and make sure that people's safety comes first. But I think in the women's game, both sides of the Atlantic, people are used to this, used to being having things in the way they have to overcome, and they've done a fantastic job in the last 10 years specifically. And there was wonderful work that went on before that as well, when it was really tough, fighting for equality and fighting for a seat at the table. But now that I think the women's game is at the table and has government recognition and has a bedrock and a framework to build on, I think those people will go to work again. And people forget, Jimmy, the NWSL was the first professional sports league in the world to operate a bubble within COVID and operate with 0 cases and put on a tournament and do it right, televised and everything else. And I think that sometimes goes unnoticed. In the shadow of the MLB, in the shadow of the NFL, and everybody who is running professional sports now. It was the National Women's Soccer League here in the US that did it first and did it well. So we can deliver both on the field and off, I believe.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to hear, and obviously your professional experience, it's really fascinating, no doubt, for the listeners, sort of to hear that, how resolute the game is and how the people involved in the game are determined to sort of keep the momentum going in every way that they possibly can. And sort of turning our attention to your role with the Jamaican team. Now, we know obviously Jamaica produces some great athletes. We've sort of seen them at the Olympic Games, and phenomenal athletes, and in terms of at the games, and we've seen success in the women and men's team play, and perhaps punch above their weight really in terms of all demographics considered. But what's your sort of take on the game in Jamaica at the moment? How's things getting on for you there?
Well, obviously it's a difficult time. The game continues to grow in Jamaica. There is, as you said, there's a huge sporting heritage. Track and field is massive. You know, you can reel off the names, Merlin Ottey, and even back in my day, and even now, you know, Usain Bolt and everybody else. I mean, it's a lot like Wales. A lot like Wales, Jamaica has sport woven into its fabric. Mm-hmm. Now, again, a little bit like Wales, maybe not the resource of other countries and everything that goes with that. So, how do you make up for that? You make up for that with people. You make up for that with you know, hard work and thought and collaboration. And that's what generally happens in Jamaica. They make the most out of what they have. It's an emerging nation. Mm-hmm. The story of the Reggae Girls is one that caught the eye at the last World Cup in France. And
Absolutely.
I think everybody's second favourite team was the Reggae Girls, to a lot of, you know, to be honest. And I think what the challenge we have now as staff coming in, obviously after the World Cup, is to build on that legacy and to make sure we continue to improve and qualify for Australia, because we want to build on the success that has happened, and some of that is on the field, some of that is down to us as coaches, and some of that is down to the Federation and the supporters of the Federation. In doing that, we have phenomenal support from Cedella Marley, who is Bob Marley's daughter, and the Marley Foundation, who are huge supporters of the Reggae Girls and the team, and we owe so much to them in terms of going forward. And hopefully, the really exciting thing, Jimmy, is we have plans to come to the UK with the Reggae Girls in 2021 or in 2022, whenever the time is right, and visit huge cities with populations of Jamaicans that have emigrated around the world. A really interesting stat that people probably don't know: there's more Jamaicans around the world than there are on the island itself. Wow. Jamaicans travel; that's what they do, and we can't wait to bring the Reggae Girls to the UK so we can see the fans and bring the team to them as well. So it's a really exciting time, even though it's a cautious time, and we're waiting, obviously, for the governments to allow us to do it the right way. But it's really exciting time, mate.
No, absolutely. And just out of interest, in terms of, you sort of mentioned there, we sort of see, you know, obviously, you know, different countries and you know, people migrate, like you mentioned there, and we've seen the likes of sort of, you know, the Ireland men's team, and we've seen players across many different teams, you know, sort of recruit players who were perhaps brought up somewhere else. In terms of Jamaica, part of the recruitment policy, are there opportunities for people who have Jamaican heritage or were born in Jamaica and perhaps moved, you know, for work or any other reason and live somewhere else? Or is it purely, do you guys recruit from Jamaica itself only for the national team?
No, you're right. The first part of what you said there is more likely the case. So, as I said, you know, Jamaicans travel, that's what they do. You know, there's a huge Jamaican influence in the UK and in other places. And you know, if you qualify to play for Jamaica through your parents or your grandparents, you have to get a Jamaican passport. That is part of it. But if you have Jamaican parents or Jamaican grandparents, you qualify. So, you know, for any young girl out there that may qualify, we're interested in them. We're interested in knowing who they are, in supporting their development. And, you know, one day we hope that there are millions of young girls around the world aspiring to be a reggae girl. That's really what we want. You know?
Absolutely. And did the sort of success of the last World Cup, did that sort of create a buzz, you know, amongst the national team in terms of, you know, people wanting to get involved? Obviously, you know, success on the world stage is key for any nation in any sport. But what was it like for because the team obviously did, you know, really well in the last World Cup. Did that have a big impact, do you think, in terms of people wanting to get involved?
Oh, it did, and it brought the Reggae Girls into people's front rooms, and it really gave rise to the brand, if you like. People love the way that Jamaica plays soccer. People love the way that, you know, like you said, Jamaica is famous for its athleticism, and we're trying to bring that as a central staple of the national team. We want to match everybody in terms of athleticism and really bring that to the fore. And when people, you know, back in Jamaica see their national teams performing in that way, there's a real connection. And, you know, you hear wonderful stories of murals at airports and things being done and those kinds of things. I remember, you know, back during my time with England, you hear stories of how it's affecting people back home and what is it's taken on its own lifeblood, and that's when you know you really do have an opportunity to do something special, and we're seeing those things start to happen around the reggae girls now as well. So it's fantastic.
I mean, from a coaching perspective, what's it like to work with? Obviously the athletes are fantastic, and from your point of view, from a technical point of view, what's it like to work with sort of the players, David, in terms of introducing them to your experience from a technical point of view?
Well, the players are fantastic. Let's have it straight. Like, a lot of people think that, as you go down the world rankings and you get into kind of anybody outside the top 20, that maybe the players are not as good as the others. That's not the case. In a lot of cases, you look at our players and they're playing in the vast majority are playing in the top leagues around the country and around the world. And they're doing well in those leagues, and that continues to improve. And our players, from a technical and tactical standpoint, have put as much into becoming professionals as everybody else. And what they've done the hard yards, they've done the sacrifice, and they continue to live their lives daily as professionals, and they're reaping the benefits of that. And most of our players, or a lot of our players certainly, have had fantastic experiences in the North American college system. They've spent 4 years in college playing and living as professionals and developing in that environment, which is superb. So they've had a great 4-year apprenticeship before they even turn pro themselves.
Absolutely.
Which is double what a lad gets in a pro club in the UK even. So
absolutely,
the environment that players are going through to get to the national team is improving all the time, and the players, when we had the CONCACAF Olympic qualifying in January, when I worked with the players for the first time, I was impressed not only by their level of knowledge and understanding, but about their levels of professionalism and their want to go on and achieve more than we've already achieved. Because that's one thing in sport and in life. Once you've done something or made a little success, some people's mentality is to say, well, I've done that now and that's enough. And what you find with these with these professional ladies is they want more. They want to improve, they want to get better, and they want to go and do it again on the world stage at the next World Cup. And that's when you can really get some amazing results.
No, fantastic. And in terms of your vision, you mentioned there the Olympics, and obviously, down to COVID, there was a change in dates, and the World Cup is sort of scheduled in Australia as well, which promises to be a great World Cup. And what's sort of your vision? I mean, in terms of, your collective vision, I should say, in terms of the team itself. Is it sort of to go as far as you can? And I know probably keep some of the goals in house and don't want to sort of give away too much in terms of goals, but I'm sure you probably set a benchmark of but generally speaking, how far can they go in terms of going forward?
Well, look, if football's taught us anything in the last decade, it's never to set a limit on aspiration, because when Leicester turned around and won the league, nobody would have believed that. Liverpool spent 30 years chasing it, and now they've done it. Club game and even national teams do amazing things, all around. You look at someone like the North Carolina Courage and the domination they've had in the NWSL in recent years, and the fight between them and some of the other powerhouses, and the Portland Thorns and other clubs, and it generally is the limit of your belief, and that was the case for us in 2015. We set a goal to inspire the nation. We didn't set a goal to win the World Cup. Our goal was to inspire the nation, and I think everyone would agree that that's something we certainly achieved.
Absolutely.
We'll do the same thing with Jamaica now, I'm sure. And the head coach, Hubert Busby Jr., who is a former reggae boy, who is a former professional himself, used to be the goalkeeper coach and has since become the head coach. He has a fantastic plan for us in terms of where we're going and what we're going to do, not just to win football matches, but to represent Jamaica in the best possible way. And that's what we're all behind, and that's what we're going to try and do. And where that takes us, mate, we're not going to set a limit on that,
Absolutely. And like you said there, that's one of the beauties about football. We've seen incredible things achieved. But I get the sense as well, David, from speaking to you, that it's not just about, obviously, you know that you're a winner and you want to, win on the field. But I get the sense it's also about, off the field, the impact it has on the nation in terms of getting players involved and generally from the social point of view too.
Yeah, no doubt, Jimmy. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen what sport has done in my own home country in Wales. I know what sport has done for me. I know how our sporting culture back home, permeates people's lives, not just on a national level. Obviously, the Welsh rugby team is a phenomenal example of that. It brings an entire country together to watch the Six Nations matches and match day on it. Cardiff on a match day is one of the places you want to be on your bucket list. I tell everybody that.
Absolutely.
But I've also seen it on a local level. You think about my local village and where I came from. We have Singenid Rugby Club there, a small little rugby club with a fantastic tradition, where every week people turn up in droves to watch and live, and their lives are intertwined with the rugby club itself. And I've seen it not just on a national level do things wonderful for wins and losses, but also how it affects people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And that's something I've carried with me across the Atlantic. That's something I see here in the US as well, in how people love their sport. Everybody loves their sport here. Everybody loves to be part of something and wants to be, it wants to be part of their state and their professional sports team in their state or their college team in their state. And that's something that's really important. It can't go underestimated, the value of sport in people's lives, especially now.
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. I think it's a great point and a great philosophy to have in general. Really, we've seen some very difficult times, and it's obviously not suggesting it's a solution to what's going on, but certainly it gives people an outlet in terms of just being able to watch sport and enjoy their sport. And I mean, you mentioned Wales there, and the Rugby World Cup draw was done recently, and obviously from a football point of view, the men's team is sort of moving forward too, and it's a proud sporting nation as well, and it's had a big impact there too. Do you sort of keep an eye out for the results? Know that you sort of find a way to watch the rugby and the football?
I do. I'm a very proud Welshman, mate, and even though I might be 5,500 miles away, I watch the Welsh women's team, I watch the men's football team, I watch the rugby, and Mum started a little tradition in our house when I was younger. Me and my sister and my mum, and she used to put the flags out on the bay window, and everybody driving past would beat their horns, and our house was the house in our little valley where you expected to see the Welsh flag outside when Wales played. And that's something I still do to this day with my kids, and we do here in Florida, and we get a few strange looks because nobody really knows why there's a dragon on a flag.
Yeah.
We are the only country in the world with a dragon on our flag, but I mean, our women's team in football has been on a real upward curve, and we still trying to fight for a playoff spot, and trying to take the women's game forward. There's been some great work done there, and obviously the men's team. Everybody knows about the success of the Euros in 2016.
Absolutely, yeah.
We really hit the world stage, and what Chris Coleman and the team did there, and the staff, some of which I was very fortunate to work with in my time coming through the Welsh FA. At the time, Osian Roberts was the technical director of the FA, and he was the coach of the national team in 2016 doing that Euro run as well. And it's people, it's an amalgamation of growing up in the valleys and having that pride, and then being fortunate enough to work with some people who were phenomenal at what they did, that gave me the opportunity to actually act on that and go and do some of that myself.
Yeah, no, it's interesting stuff. And I suppose one thing that sort of, that no doubt some of our listeners, we have a range of listeners, from people who are enthusiastic about sport, watching the game. We have coaches who listen to. One thing that I'm sort of curious to ask is, in terms of from a coaching point of view, do you, in terms of a coach, say, if you coach a team with a bigger player pool available to you compared to do you change your coaching style? Let's say, obviously, if you're coaching the England team, no doubt you're going to have a broader player pool to choose from. And if that's less, what do you do to adapt the game, David, if anything?
I think, well, you're quite right. I think the best way I heard it described, Jimmy, back, as I was coming through the system, was that there's an artist side to it and a science side to it. And, that was a really good distinction for me, because I do think there are things that have a vocational academic background where you can have some substance in, well, this is why I do what I do. I don't think we can consider ourselves professionals unless we can reverse engineer it and explain back why some of our communication style is the way it is, and why we get messages across the players in a certain way, or why we have a training session the way we do. And for coaches listening out there, I'd like them to reflect on that and think about that, because we want to be a profession, and it's no good just to say we're professional. As coaches, we have to be professional.
Absolutely.
And that means looking internally and reviewing what we do, and having an academic and a vocational evidence base for why we do what we do. But I think there's also the artistry side of it, the art of coaching, which is a little bit more tacit and experience based, and perhaps knowing when to say things and when not to say things. And that's something I've learned later on in my career. Earlier on in my career, I've been quick to run up and show everybody my knowledge and try to get a seat at the table almost. Look, I know this and I know that. And if experience tells you anything, it helps you to consolidate your own feelings and feel comfortable in yourself, and then you can concentrate on the real art of getting the best out of people, because that's our business. Whether you're an under-12 coach at Aber Valley YMCA or whether you're an England coach, what you're really trying to do is get the best out of your players. And I think I would really hope, and unfortunately we've seen of late, there's been a video on social media here in the States, I don't know if it's made its way to the UK at this point, but there was a coach in Georgia just a little hour away from me here, an American football coach who has actually struck a child. It's gone that far that they've struck a young child in a practice or in a game because they've dropped the ball or because they've done something. And I think for a long time there's been great work done in the UK. I remember the FA doing I think they had Ray Winston involved 10 years ago in a respect campaign.
That's
and we kind of curbed it in the UK a bit. But I think worldwide we need to have a look at coaching as a profession.
Absolutely.
And obviously the extremes I'm talking about there, we have to stop. But I think everybody needs to take a breath and take a step back and think, next time they're shouting at their youth group, or next time they're shouting at their kids for missing a goal, think about it. Think about, why am I conveying this message? Is it an emotional message? Is it a frustration message? Is that really what I want to be doing at this point in time? Because there's unbelievable people in grassroots football, mate, in the UK. I've been fortunate enough to benefit from a lot of them. The volunteer network of people in the UK doing soccer and football is unbelievable. But I do think we see on telly Jurgen and Pep and Jose running around pointing, and sometimes I've been guilty of it. I lost a job. I was sacked after 3 games in a semi-professional team in Wales in my early 20s because I wanted to wear an open collar shirt and a scarf because I wanted to look like Jose, and they thought I'd be more of a tracksuit manager, and that was a period in my life where I wanted to try and be a bit more like Jose. So I've learned the hard way on that one as well. I understand.
Yeah, and that's great. That's really fascinating stuff, and I think that's certainly a huge takeaway for any coach, especially any coach of any age, but certainly the younger coaches coming through, thinking, well, okay, I might be a coach of a Sunday league team or semi-pro team, but you're right. I think it's really important to set the stall out, and irrespective of who you're coaching and working with, have that professionalism, attention to detail, and make sure you get the basics right for sure. That's a really powerful message, David, I think, for any sort of one listening, as in terms of the aspirations of being a coach for sure, and equally in saying that, like you mentioned there, I think sometimes, I'm a parent myself, and I love my sport, and I get passionate about that. You want your kids to do the best you can, but I think it's one of them sort of having that sort of discipline to make sure that we can appreciate that for young people to develop. They need that environment that's conducive to development. That's really powerful stuff. But it's been a really fascinating interview, David. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I've learnt a lot myself, really, as you've done. Very fortunate to speak to people like yourself and sort of learn as well. And I'm sure the listeners have really enjoyed it too. So we wish you all the best, and we'll certainly keep an eye out to see how Jamaica do, and that'll be continue being everyone's second team. I really enjoyed watching them at the actual the last. I was on TV watching most of the last World Cup, and I thought it was fantastic, and hopefully every nation involved. I wish them all the best, and certainly wish you all the best. And thanks again for the interview, David. Great stuff.
Well, I appreciate it, Jimmy. Thanks for the opportunity, and hopefully not in the too distant future, we'll be in the UK with the Reggae Girls and looking to connect with our fans there. And I really appreciate the opportunity. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, David.